for being a somewhat Christian organization, they really love to make idols. Patrick is like a deity. He's deified in PHP. I'm Andrew. I'm 20 years old, and I was in PHP agency.
Okay, so tell me about your time in People Helping Patrick. What age were you when you got recruited into it, and how did you get recruited into it? What was the process? Who got you? Tell us.
Starting out, I mean, early on, I was a pretty ambitious kid, you could say. I was watching Patrick's valuetainment content for quite some time and was interested in that. I was thinking I might want to like start my own business at some point, just you know, cool ideas that I had, I guess. But I was watching his content. I had a LinkedIn. I followed Patrick on LinkedIn. I think I liked one of his posts and I got a message on LinkedIn, and it was one of the PHP agents. He reached out to me and basically asked me the typical spiel of, hey, do you keep your work options open, all that. And at the time, I was actually 17 years old. I was going into my senior year of high school, and I basically just went through the recruitment process with him. We hopped on a call, and he gave me the typical pitch that they give. I was very interested, but at the time, I didn't even have a credit card or anything like that. So I wasn't able to actually sign up because uh, I didn't have the ability. You have to pay $200 to join PHP. And so that kind of went away. And the funny thing was when I told the guy that I was 17, he basically told me that, it's kind of an issue, but it's not really an issue. And looking back on it, I realized that he was probably just trying to hit a target. And man, I'm guessing now that he was going to maybe like fabricate my date of birth almost to get it in the system so he could hit his like promotion or something. That was my first exposure. And then during that entire school year, I didn't have anything to do with PHP. I just kept going to school and working. And then towards the end of the year, I watched like another PBD video and he mentioned PHP agency. It kind of like refreshed my memory. And because I was still interested from that last time, I did some like searching of my own. And unfortunately, I didn't come across your video first. I came across a different video called it's like 3 months at PHP agency, my experience. And this was like a very positive video that somebody had made, and the person that made this video ended up being my mentor at PHP. And I actually reached out to him on Instagram and I said, hey, I watched your video, like I'm very interested. And to be fair, like he played it very well. He was almost the gatekeeper in this scenario where he was like, yeah, I mean, I don't like to take a lot of people on, like you're pretty young. I was 18 now at this time, and pretty much just graduating high school. I was 18 years old, still in school. And I did a couple calls with him. I had got my own credit card. And so this time when he gave me the pitch, and I actually have some of the questions that they ask when they're trying to get you on board. So they pretty much start by saying, what are some of the dreams and goals you have? What's the amount of income you would need to make those dreams and goals a reality? And when will your current job or profession give you that income? And then if you had to decide between staying at the current job or going after your ideal life, if your job isn't going to get you there, which one would you choose?
Yeah,
These
yeah.
are the kind of questions.
I mean, to many people, those questions might seem innocent enough, but when I see that first question, what's your dream? What's your why or whatever? I see, okay, this is the emotional hook to get them to start thinking in a fantastical way. And then what was the next one? How long would it take your current job? Or no, how much money would you need to get there? That's like they're buttering you up for like that your job is never going to pay enough, so you need to do something else. And then, of course, doubling down on it by saying, how long would it take you at your job? Another way they say this is like, with World Financial Group, this is actually the company that Patrick started in with his MLM journey, and presumably where he got the entire copycat idea for PHP from, is my guess. There's one guy who in one of my videos, he's like, have you ever interviewed your future? And it's like, he's basically saying like, look at someone who's been in your job or your company for many years. Like, do they drive that nice car? Are they living that life? Do they have that house? And so it's sort of like a subtle way of getting you to start thinking about this, but really it's a way of trying to detach you from whatever that initial like dream was. Like if you say your dream was to become like a famous singer and you just wanted to make enough money on the side to like fund your recording studio time. At first, they would be like, yeah, that's great. You know, this is the way to do that part time. But eventually, they would try to distance you from that and tell you, you know, you don't even really want to be a singer. This is really what you should be doing. I mean, you can make so much money
Mhm.
doing this that you're not even going to want to be a singer. All the things that you want to get from being a singer, you can get from doing this. Also, I want to go back to you talking about the guy who first recruited you on LinkedIn when you were 17. I also think you're correct that he was probably just trying to hit some quota by recruiting you, even though you weren't 18. Because I know with some of these insurance themed MLM companies, they can recruit and they can get your $200, but you're not able to take the licensing for the actual insurance unless you're 18, but they'll still happily take your money. That's what I've experienced from talking to many people who have been in these insurance themed MLM companies, WFG, PHP, another one who I can't remember the name of at the moment. But yeah, okay. So this is quite recent then, right? Because you're 20 now. So this was when you were 18. So this is all quite fresh. So what's the next step of the journey look like?
Yeah, I guess I signed up, paid my $200, and I was very motivated, I guess. So I was like, listen, I'll do whatever I need to do. Like I really wanted to get into business, start selling. I was really always interested in finance and financial services. I had somewhat of a background in like the stock market and stuff. So I was like, listen, I'm ready to go. Like, what do I need to do next? And like the first thing, like you mentioned, was licensing. That's one of them. And that's kind of like a multi-week process. But also they have you do a couple of other things. And the other things is, in my opinion, where the scam exists. And there's a list essentially that you have to fulfill in order to pretty much reach the next level. And the next level is what they call fast start school, is where it starts. And this fast start school, the way they market it, it's like this is where you're going to really learn how to be a killer in the business. You're going to learn how to get clients, how to how to do these sales calls. Essentially, they call them training calls or whatever. But and that's to your point with the language. The language, I think, is what really keeps people unaware of what they're doing. But anyway, I the basically the list of things you have to do involves a couple things. For one, they want to meet the spouse, which basically means if you have a partner, they want to meet your partner. Or for me, they met my parents. Okay. And they're basically trying to get, looking back on it, they're trying to get the people somewhat on board with what you're doing, because if they don't have the repertoire of language that you're armed with, they're gonna understand that what you're doing is a scam. And then you create a top 25, is what they call it, where it's like your top 25 people that fit a certain criteria of, okay, maybe they have a family, or they're this age to this age, or maybe they might have their work options open, or whatever it may be. And that's basically anybody you can think of in your phone. And then you have to complete field trainings, which are essentially sales calls. And then you have to do a financial analysis in order to get the fast start school again. And the financial analysis is basically you having to buy a policy. And for me specifically, this is a bit of a story. When I was on the call with my mentor at the time, I basically expressed like, listen, I really don't think I need a policy. I really don't think I need a policy. And he basically said two things. First, he said, okay, well, how can you sell something if you don't believe in it? And I was like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. And then the second thing he said was, I mentioned to him like, listen, if something were to happen to me, I'm pretty sure my family would be able to take care of everything. Like maybe there will be costs, but like I'm not. The odds are pretty low that I die first off. But then also, I'm pretty sure he can handle it. Like my dad's 50, he's got a job, whatever. And he said, "Well, do you really want to put that burden on your family in like the hardest time of their life?" And so you get your policy. And another thing you have to do is get a big event ticket. So you basically buy a ticket to go to one of Patrick's events, and then yeah, so like again, this list of things is to get to fast start school, all of which I did. And then I want to touch more on like the top 25 and the field trainings as well. But Do you
Yeah,
have any?
let me say some things about so far before you get into the top 25, but remember that so that we can come back to it. It's just stunning how exactly copy and paste, cookie cutter copy and paste it is from every other like insurance themed MLM scheme, insurance disguised MLM scheme, like down to like the naming of Fast Start School, you know? I also love what you said because you put it so simply with the 2 points about how it was essentially mandatory for you to buy a policy. Of course, I'm sure it didn't say anywhere that as part of this journey, you have to buy a policy. They told you it was a financial, what was it? Financial needs analysis?
Financial analysis.
Financial analysis. Okay. And really what it was buying a policy. And I know exactly how they butter you up for this. They'll say like, "Oh yeah, you know, you're a young kid, you don't have really any money, this and that, but did you know that the policy could be worth this much?" And like I've even heard people in these insurance MLMs be like, "Oh, if you get a policy that covers you for $1 million, I've just increased your net worth by $1 million." And it's like, uh I actually don't think that's how that works, but okay. And also, like, yeah, you're a 19-year-old kid or whatever. It's like 18-year-old kid. You don't need life insurance. Like, you know what I you know what I mean? But him saying the two things to you, like, one, how can you sell something you don't use or you don't buy? It seems reasonable, but again, it's complete nonsense. If you worked at McDonald's and you went for your lunch break, your manager wouldn't be like, "What? You're not eating McDonald's for your lunch break? You need to be eating McDonald's." That would never happen. If you went to get a job at a car dealership and you drove a car that was a different make and model than the one sold at the dealership, you wouldn't get in trouble for that. They wouldn't be like, "Sorry, man, you're just not cut out for this." They wouldn't care. I'm sure there's guys who drive nice BMWs and Mercedes cars that sell like Toyotas and Lexus and whatever. Of course. Then him putting the emotional like stakes on it, being like, "Do you really want to do that to your family at the hardest time in your life?" Like literally holding the most drastic, dramatic, devastating hypothetical over your head. Like, what if you die? Think about your mom, how she's gonna cry, and your parents are gonna be so sad. It's like it's so scummy, and I'm just I really applaud the way that you detailed it so simply, but it shows how when these companies say, "Well, it's not mandatory. We didn't hold a gun to your head and force you to buy a policy." Well, it wasn't mandatory, okay, but it was de facto mandatory. Maybe if you had really stood your ground and said, "No, no, no, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it." But they've already put the pressure on you. You know, they've manipulated you into buying it, which is the basis of fraud, as far as I'm aware, of criminal fraud. When you lie to someone or you deceive or manipulate someone for financial gain, I mean, or for
Mhm.
free labor, you know, that's human trafficking. That's what that means. So the fact that you're like literally fresh out of high school, like, you know,
I was in high school.
you were still in high school. That's what I mean. So it's like for this grown adult to be saying that to you, it's like, fuck, man. How do you look at yourself in the mirror? You know, how do you go to sleep at night? How do you wake up and look in the mirror and be like, "Yeah, let's go recruit some high school kids to and tell them that their mom is gonna cry if they die because they didn't buy a policy from me." It's like, you know, one more thing about this. MLMs will always try to say we're not a pyramid scheme because a pyramid scheme is just about cash. You know, we sell a product. It's the most like see-through money laundering scheme, you know. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, I bought a product. I didn't pay to join. I paid for the product and you didn't get paid to recruit me. You got paid a commission for selling the product. But the product is usually either a combination of something you don't need, something that's actually like useless that you could get for a much cheaper price elsewhere. Like it only exists to get as a vehicle to get your money over and as like a buffer, you know, a layer in between your money and joining the thing. Otherwise, why would they tell you you need to buy a policy as part of your fast start school? Because it's you don't actually have to. You didn't actually have to. I'm not aware of any business sales job where you have to buy the thing yourself first for your own personal use before you can become a salesperson. It's just such an obvious disguise for the pyramid selling scheme. But yeah, go on.
To touch on that point a little bit, I would say that an insurance MLM is almost, worse. Let's say, you have an MLM selling water. At least you understand what the product is, and if you're selling it to somebody that's not in the MLM, they know that they're buying water. But in the case of an insurance MLM, and I can't verify this 100%, but based on the exposure that I had, I'm not overly convinced that the vast majority of people selling these insurance products like index universal life policies and even annuities, which are transferring over people's retirement accounts into these financial products. I'm not that convinced that the people selling these within PHP agency really know what they're selling.
1000%. It's a great point, and I agree with you because I've been doing this quite some time. The very first video I did about MLM was about World Financial Group, and I was pretty taken just with the recruiting element of it and the whole charade of like the different blue jacket, red jacket, and the rings. Like I was
Yeah.
just sort of, I just thought the theatrics of it all was funny. And then I started talking to more people who were in the company and more people who were in other insurance themed MLM companies. And they all talked about how like all of these trainings, all of these sales meetings were about nothing more than recruiting. And nobody could even answer a question. This is universal, by the way, no pun intended, universal indexed universal life, but this was universal across the former distributors I've talked to from every one of these insurance MLMs. Is like they wanted to understand what the product was so they could sell it, because apparently it wasn't covered in the licensing process. So they would ask their upline, and then people would tell me like, yeah, I asked my upline. And he was like, oh, don't worry about that. Or like, ask your upline's upline, and maybe, and nobody could ever
Yep.
get an answer. So, I mean, they contradict themselves when they say, how can you sell something that you're not using yourself? But they themselves couldn't even explain what it is that they have. So really great point with the water. It's a really great analogy. At least with water, you would know what it is that you're buying.
Yep. Also in MLMs, the false earnings claims on social media are like an issue, right? But I think I've seen even with PHP, certain agents post claims about products that I did the math on it just like physically impossible. Yeah, so I don't know if like some regulation could step in with like I mean you can't make false claims about a product. To me
What's
that
an
seems
example? Like, give me an example.
saying, oh, if you put $10 a month into an index universal life policy, by the age of 50, you'll have like this many $1 million or something. And it's like comment cash if you want to learn more. It's ridiculous.
I mean, what interest rate would that be? Like compounding if you didn't touch it and you put in $10 a
Well,
month?
yeah,
Like,
I don't know, but I did the math and it didn't work. I don't remember the exact
yeah,
numbers, but
there's
it's
no
just,
way. There's no
yeah.
way.
Back to the top 25 though, you want to, so what they do before you're even licensed. So you sign up, pay your $200, you make your top 25, you kind of walk through this process of like setting your goal or whatever. And you build out the top 25 and you do a call with your mentor. They basically on the phone, this is one thing they also do just constantly. They kind of assume the close and they just start calling these people with you on the phone. And they're like, "Oh, hey, you're Andrew's dad. How's it going? Andrew needs to get his training appointments out of the way. Would you be available in the next couple of days to do a training call?" And they pretty much call all these people to some degree a little bit without your consent, a little bit without your consent, and try to set up these training appointments using your name to do so. They say they're training appointments so that you can get exposure, but they're trying to sell policies.
And also, I'm assuming it's a bonus if the person also wants to join.
So this is the way they frame it.
Okay.
They basically say, okay, we're gonna set up these calls, and we're basically gonna give them somewhat of an ultimatum and say, okay, we can take this call one of two ways. We can talk to you more about PHP agency, what we do, how you can like earn an income with us, or we can talk to you more about like the product side, and then kind of go that way. For me, all these calls ended up being sales calls, basically to try to sell policies because the people were all typically older with jobs and stuff. But if they were my age, then it would pretty much be like a recruitment call. So it kind of depended on the person. The kicker with this is that when you're doing these calls, because they frame it as exposure and you're getting training, you're not licensed yet. So any sale that's made, the commission goes straight to your mentor.
Yes. This is something I've talked about in my videos before. There's a really big insurance themed MLM company whose name I can't remember for legal reasons, but I talked about how their fast start program, they have a system where they're trying to get you this fast start bonus where you recruit 6 people and sell them a policy as well. But it's before you're licensed, and they tell you that it's part of your licensing process, it's part of your training that you do this before you're licensed so that you have experience. This is how they frame it,
Yep.
right? So that you
That's
have
exactly what they
experience.
say.
Yeah, so that you have experience before you get licensed. So that way when you're licensed, you're ready to go. Well, really what it is that they're just leeching and sucking the blood of your warm market, who are going to be the people most likely to buy sales, your immediate friends and family. And then they get all of the commission. And then afterwards, when you are licensed, those people are already paid up with your upline. So they're not buying from you. And chances are you're not going to have much luck selling to the people who you're less familiar with, like not immediate friends, or like, God forbid, trying to go out there in the world and like cold sell life insurance. Good luck. So now your only option really is to tap someone else's warm market, tap root someone else's warm market. So it's a complete trick. It's a complete con, because why would I not just wait until I'm licensed and make all of the commission myself? Surely I don't need my upline to hold my hand, to call my own father and ask him if he wants to buy this thing. It's just complete nonsense.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's something else.
Going forward from this, you do the top 25 calls or whatever. I'm assuming some sales were made to your upline, and then now you're in the system. So tell us about like your journey from that point on. Like, were you trying to be an insurance salesman? Were you trying to recruit people? Was it a bit of both? Like, what was your experience like?
After I did the top 25, the immediate concern for me was getting licensed. And during this time, I kept wondering to myself, like, okay, how am I going to get clients? Like, I didn't really understand that concept. I'm like, okay, well, maybe when I go to Fast Start School, they'll tell me, like, oh, I need to do, reach out to certain people, or maybe I even need to like knock doors. There's like, I didn't know at the time. Uh, so maybe I was just like a little bit oblivious, but my main concern was getting licensed. So I had like a couple weeks to do that. Like, that's kind of the time that they said. Like, they said, oh, if you want to do it quickly, 2 weeks is like the good amount of time. And so I pretty much did all my studying in about a week. My grandfather actually passed away, and I remember on my way up and back from going to the funeral, I was sitting on my computer reading through the documents to study for my exam, and ended up taking my exam on the day that I graduated high school. While I was at school, I was taking practice exams, and I passed the exam by like 1% or something. Not that it's important for the story necessarily, but yeah, I was in PHP though at that point in time. I got my license. I highly motivated. There was a time though, I remember, you know, this is something that you're familiar with as well, but the time commitment is like truly incredible, you know?
Yeah, yeah. For how much they shit on 9 to 5 jobs, it's like I would rather work 9 to 5 than 24/7. And
Yeah.
it's always so funny too. The people preaching about the freedom are the ones who you always see, like presumably the best case studies of successful people in any MLM are people that you like it would be rare to see them around because they're just chilling on a beach, sipping a pina colada, enjoying their time freedom, right? Why is it that these guys are always at the office, like doing some rah hype up? Why is it that they're always on a Zoom call? They're always at some speaking event. They're always prospecting. They're always on the phone. It's like, you motherfuckers do not have time freedom. Stop saying that.
Yeah. So I was probably in it for about 6 months or so. And during that time, I never actually got to do a fast start school because he was basically trying to get me to Dallas, like a 20 or so hour drive, like, or a flight away. And that wasn't something that was really on my mind. But during that time, I ended up recruiting like 20 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually impressive, especially for being in there a short time. But I mean, you were fresh out of high school, like you just graduated. I assume there was other like ambitious green classmates of yours. I'm assuming that's where the bulk of it came from.
Yep. Definitely. 100% Instagram DMs, just firing it up. And even today, like, I'll go back to my hometown, people run into me and be like, "Hey, are you still doing insurance?" And I'm like, "Nope, not in that anymore." And I think I'm very grateful that I got up when I did because it's like that is a very sticky thing.
For sure. Is anyone else that you recruited like still in?
No.
That's good. So you didn't have any
Yeah.
like long-term relationships that were destroyed from this.
No, I didn't, thankfully.
That's really
No.
good. I mean, that's another
Yep.
way that they sort of ensnare you is by mixing the oil and water of your clients and friends and family. It's like it's inherently complicated and messy and, as you said, sticky, because if your entire client base is your friends and family, and your entire like downline recruits who you stand to make money off of at their peril is all your friends and family, you have a choice between going, oh, this is wrong, sorry everyone, I made a mistake, this actually isn't the thing that's going to make us all rich, and sort of bowing your head about that, or doubling down and being like, well, if they just all did it, they could do it too, maybe they're just not working hard enough, and then becoming that asshole and losing the relationships anyway. So it seems again like it would be a reasonable thing to immediately contact your friends and family when you get a sales job, but it's actually kind of not the thing to do. Like anytime I've had a job, I was never like, oh, I just got hired here, everyone. Make sure you come spend money here, and then like feel a way about it when people like go eat at a different restaurant or like go shop at a different store or whatever it is. But again, in MLM, everything is a lie. Literally everything is a lie. Everything is upside down. You tell me one experience that you had in MLM or one thing they said to you, and I'll translate it for you and tell you what it really means and what the real ramifications of it are. But I mean, props to you. 20 people, that's impressive. Like, you obviously have a gift when it comes to just like sales and speaking and a way with people. So, I mean,
Uh, I mean, I think a part of it was that I had like a lot of people knew that I was into finance. And as a result, like they knew I was interested in the stock market. Like if I had a buddy in a class, they knew that, oh, I'm in personal finance class and I know a lot about this stuff. So it's like I'm an individual that they would think to trust.
I mean, you honestly, if I didn't know you, which I mean, this is our first time talking, but if I had just saw a still image of you right now as you are, I'd be like, oh yeah, this guy's in finance. 1,000%.
Oh
You've
yeah.
you've just got the look. I mean, the polo, the way your hair is like perfect. I mean, you're a very handsome guy. I'm not trying to like say that you're wearing like a costume, but you look like you look like you know what what you're doing when it comes to finance.
Yeah. I mean, no thanks to PHP, I guess, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's how it goes. One thing I wanted to point out is that during that summer, and actually from the point I got in until the point that I left, urgency was like the name of the game. So there was always some kind of event going on, or oh, if you hit this marker by the end of the week, by the end of the month, you're going to get into this meeting or you're going to get this promotion. And the way I think about it now is like they have their top guys, and their top guys have like their own minions, and those minions are the people like churning,
Yeah.
and the people up here just never change. Okay, so there's a constant churn going on of the people down below, and when you get in, when there is this urgency, they're like, listen, we're in the middle of this massive event where
Yeah.
if you get three recruits, it was 333 at the very beginning. So if you get three recruits, three applications, and 3,000 points, which basically means like $3,000 of monthly policy issued, then you get a promotion. And because that's happening all the time, as soon as somebody gets recruited, they're heavily incentivized to make that top
Yeah.
25 and then call all those people. And I'm going to talk about my recruits, the people that I recruited. I never really had any contact with them, honestly. As soon as I recruited them, my mentor pretty much took over
Yep.
and was the main contact with all of them. So he was immediately making them a top 25, and just like, so that's what I mean. His level of individual was just churning through, and that's how the business works.
Of course. That's another thing too, that you talk about, this like blitzkrieg of sales and incentives and promotions and goals to hit that are just like, it's constant. You're always in the middle of a new expansion or a new, doesn't matter how long the company's been around. Like Nathan in my ACN video, he talks about how like, ACN's quite an old company, and he talks about like, we have a new company that's expanding in the area. It's like, no the fuck you don't. You've been doing this for so long. Like, the only thing new is that you're on the latest blitz of like high school students, literally, who are walking into something that they like, walking into a trap that they don't know they don't know, because they don't have enough life experience to like know what this is yet. And that's another thing where it's like, they would argue, if we were in a courtroom, they would argue, Patrick would argue, a pyramid scheme has like a big push for recruiting. We don't have that. It's about sales. Well, when you've tied the sales to recruiting, again, it's like it's de facto mandatory. Okay, it's not on paper mandatory, but if you get in there and there's the energy and the culture of like, we got to do this, we got to go 3-3-3. It's like it's not the company policy, but it is the company culture.
It's also the incentive in general. It's like you have an 18-year-old kid that wants to make some money, start a business. Okay, well, I'm at a 20% contract, and if I can just sell 5 people on this thing by the end of the next week, then I'll have a 50%, and I'm pretty much set at that point. That's the thought process.
That's another great point too with these insurance MLM schemes. It's like, okay, so if I just had more people under me, my commission will be higher. So that means when I was at a 25% contract and I didn't have anyone under me, like where did the rest of the commission go? Like my upline just pocketed that basically. That's another thing I think is lost on people is like, if they can afford to give 100% commission, but because you didn't have enough people under you, you only got 25. Well, where did the other 75 go? Somebody got it.
I wanted to mention, so with the urgency piece and the deadlines and all that, there was one specific time I was trying to hit a promotion, like my director promotion, and it was like 9:30 in the middle of the summer, and I was basically, texting people, trying to DM people like, "Hey, can you hop on a call?" Like trying to sell a policy is what I was trying to do at 9 p.m. It's like, first off, that's just crazy to begin with. But there's one particular person that I basically told him like, I just can't call this person. It's my teacher from last semester, like a 40-year-old lady. And, I knew her, but we weren't all that close. And he basically told me, it's like, well, do you think she cares about you? Like, do you think do you think she's like concerned with how you do? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think she cares about me. She was my teacher for like an entire year. And he says, well, I like to think that if somebody cares about me, that they won't feel bad about picking up the phone at 9 p.m. And I'm like, okay. So I call her. She doesn't pick up, thankfully, but it's like just the level of manipulation is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's such a scummy thing to immediately jump to such a drastic conclusion that she must not care about you because you are not, like they flipped it and put it on you to make you think this lady is somehow like a bad person because you don't want to step over the boundary of like the reading the room of it all is not present there. I wish everybody would read Ponzinomics, Robert Fitzpatrick's book, because in Ponzinomics he talks about how it used to sort of be a faux pas or like a taboo to try to sell to your sibling or your relative or your neighbor. It was sort of like seen as sleazy to be a salesman. It was an insult to be a salesman. Nobody wanted to be sold stuff, and everybody hated like the door-to-door peddlers of, whatever it was. And it just sort of happened over time with like movies. I would probably attribute it to movies. Like in the 80s, you had all these movies like Wall Street, and then like fast forward more than 10 years ago, The Wolf of Wall Street. And it's like every once or twice in a generation, you'll have a movie that like stokes the flames of people's like financial freedom dreams and scammer dreams. Even Scarface, I would say, is like one of these movies where it's like you're watching someone do bad things and do the wrong thing, but it's just so, they just make the movie so glamorous. Like I can't tell you how many of these MLM scammers that I've encountered since I started this. Absolutely, like they'll post about it, like they fawn over The Wolf of Wall Street, or they'll do that TikTok trend where it's like they're lip syncing to the audio of that one scene in Wolf of Wall Street where Jonah Hill's like, how much money you make? I don't know, 50 grand or whatever. And it's like they'll literally act out these skits in like their World Financial Group office, like their little playset fake office that, there's nothing really going on there. It's just like for show, literally. It's since become a thing, I guess, to be like, yeah, I'm hustling, I'm getting to the money, I'll sell to anyone. And it's like, does nobody have like any shame or any like poise to not try to like look at everyone in any room you walk into as like a mark or like a potential sale? Like maybe I'm old fashioned, but
one thing I want to add to that is I think that is the that is the mentality of some of the people that are at the top. Like, if you are at the top of this structure, you have to understand what's going on. Like, you just know what's going on. But I think some of the mid-level people, and especially the people that are more so at the bottom, they they really believe that they're doing the right thing. It's like they really think that they're being a gift by selling you this IUL, because based on what they're told, they believe that it's going to solve all their problems, or they believe by inviting this person to join PHP, it's going to solve all their problems. So I think there is a decent amount of people that are like in PHP, for example, that really believe they're like doing the right thing, and I think that makes it like all the more difficult for them to realize that it's not.
Totally. Okay, so you've seen a couple of these moments now that kind of rubbed you the wrong way with like the teacher and the pressuring you to buy your own policy and you're 18 years old, whatever. What was it that made you sort of start to be like, "Okay, I don't know about this anymore," and started you down the path of being like, "I'm out."
It was a combination of 2 things. I gotta give a lot of credit to my dad. Um, he had a conversation with me that he basically said he didn't basically try to tell me that it was a problem, that the company was not legitimate or whatever. He basically said that, you know, he believed that I was maybe meant to do more than be a salesperson. And so he basically told me, like, listen, if you want to go down this path of selling life insurance, that's fine. But like, is that what you want to be? Do you want to sell life insurance? Do you want that to be your thing? And at the time, because I thought it was so lucrative, part of me did in a way. But then him saying that, it definitely made me think. But the second part of that, I was about to go to college, and they were going to have a big event pretty much just prior to the first week, and I was going to be moving into school like a week before, and I was going to be on the golf team as well. And I either had to choose between going to Vegas and going to their big event, or going to college to practice golf before tryouts essentially, or qualifying. And that's really when I realized that, I obviously cared about golf. So when they really started pressuring me about the big event, it started to feel a little icky. And, it's funny how they do it, because it starts with them saying, oh, if you hit this certain target, like they tell you to buy a ticket, and then they start to give incentives. They say, hey, if you recruit this many people, then you get a ticket. And then after that, they basically say, I'll give you a ticket. And then I'll give you a ticket and I paid for your hotel. And at that point, it's like they're begging you to go. And at that point, not only my mentor, who's making good money, is telling me to uh, to go to the event, but I'm getting a call from like the leader of the base shop that makes like millions a year, and he's basically, I'm not going to say begging, but he's very enthusiastically trying to get me to go to this event. And it's just like what are we doing, guys? What are we doing?
It's so embarrassing. Like grown ass men begging some 18-year-old kid to come travel long distances to go to an event where you're going to listen to mindless motivational babble and watch Patrick Bet-David being like, yeah, I came from Iran. I worked at Bally's. I was in the military. It's like the same spiel over and over again. It's like, geez, shut up, dude. Shut up.
Yeah. So I mean, that was kind of the breaking point. And I'll name drop. David was the main guy, and he basically said, "Listen, if you don't go to this in a month from now, you won't be a part of this business." And I'm like, "I guess we'll see." And I went to college. I had the thought that I was going to try to sell policies at that point. Like, I had gotten promoted once, and so I was at like a 40% contract or something, and I was like, maybe I can reach out to people online, try to sell policies. And that just didn't happen, because once I got to school, everything started ramping, and then the finance interests apart from the insurance side really started to take off for me, and I just left that kind of in the dust. And the thing is, when you're in it and you're just constantly being bombarded, it's very hard to realize what it is. But then once you're removed and looking at it from like a bird's eye view, or from an outside perspective, it's a lot easier. And that's when I actually
Yes.
found your video on PHP, and then it kind of all made sense.
Totally, man. And what a credit to you having your dad and having golf and having the college thing that you were gonna
Yeah.
already do. You can imagine how that isn't the case where people aren't saved by their circumstances if they come from like an underprivileged background or like a broken home, or maybe they didn't have the money to go to college and they didn't have golf, they couldn't afford to be in organized
Yep.
sports, maybe they didn't have a father figure in their house. All of those
Yep.
things lend themselves in a positive way. Really, it's negative, but it's positive to the people perpetrating the evil. It's a benefit to the MLM scammers who are trying to like wow you and be like this mentor father figure to you. And but of course it's not real. It's like the most toxic positivity version of that you could have. So it's a really good thing that you didn't get caught up in it for long, and you're obviously like, on the right path. So I'm glad about that. I wanted to ask you too. I have to ask you this. Did you ever meet Patrick, or did you ever see Patrick when you were there?
I never met him personally. I was never in the office or actually in a position to meet him, but he did make appearances on calls. And this is a great question because it gives me an opportunity to talk about something else. For being a somewhat Christian organization, they really love to make idols. Patrick is like a deity.
Yep.
He's deified in PHP.
Yes. Yep. And guess what? Every other MLM CEO, it's the same thing, which is there's layers to the brainwash of it all, because not only are you idolizing some guy who's literally just like a scammer who spits motivational quotes all day, but how are you your own business owner if you have a CEO? Like all these people that talk about being entrepreneurs and having their own company, their CEO will come to the conference and they'll be like, "Make some noise for our CEO, woo!" And it's like, "But I thought you were the CEO. How can you have a CEO if you're the CEO? Isn't your name, isn't your designation like senior marketing director? Like, it sounds pretty fancy, but there's always a guy above you, and the guy above you has three dudes above him, and Patrick's at the
Yep.
tippy top. It's I call this the John Smith effect. I'm this is like a bit I do on my live streams where I talk about these like MLM leaders who nobody has heard of. But if you went to one of their conventions, the way when they come out on stage, you would think it's like Steve Jobs coming out at the Apple like yearly event, like the way they worship.
Yep.
Like it's probably more crazy than Steve Jobs coming out at the Apple event. These people are literally, as you said, deified and worshipped, and it's like some guy you've never heard of, John Smith. It's like, okay,
Yep.
Patrick is a little bit unique in that he actually has successfully leveraged the cult status within the insular PHP community and used the money to like hire celebrity speakers to build his own personal brand and valuetainment. Those Jordan Peterson, Kobe Bryant, Shaq podcasts or interviews, whatever, that he recorded at PHP events with PHP money for the tickets and whatever, wasn't released on PHP's YouTube. It was released on Valuetainment's YouTube, his own personal brand. So then the lay person who doesn't know about his background just thinks, oh, this guy's like some Walter Cronkite, Larry King type guy where he's just like a business guy who interviews people. They don't know, but it's like all built on the backs of 18-year-old kids like you
Yep.
were at the time, being tricked to spending. I don't know. I don't even want to ask how much the tickets were to go to this fucking event. Never mind. You've already put in $200 to join. You've already paid for the licensing. You've already paid for the policy. Plus, you're gonna have to pay for the flight, the hotel, the food, the travel, the Uber, etc., etc., etc. And you're gonna have to pay to get back home. And then when you get back home, you're gonna be in another blitzkrieg of trying to recruit and sell. It's like, oh my god, oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
god, you know. So yeah, I call these people John Smith. Patrick is a little bit more elevated than a John Smith, but go out on the street. Everyone knows who Jeff Bezos is, who Elon Musk is, who Bill Gates is, who Steve Jobs is. Ask them, do you know who Richard DeVos is? Like the Amway founder. They'll be like, nobody out on the street would know who that is. Nobody would know. But I've been to the Amway HQ in other countries on the other side of the world where English isn't even the first language, and there's like literally statues of these people. It's really remarkable. It is. Again, people are going to comment and say it's culty, it's cultish. No, it's a cult.
That's a great point. And I think one of the funniest examples that touches on that point that I have personally, the week leading up to the big event that was in Vegas, for one, they kept on talking about, imagine how good it would feel to walk across that stage as a director or whatever it is. But the one point I remember more than anything, one of the leaders in our group basically said, okay, I want you all to look up a video on YouTube and I want you to search how to yawn without opening your mouth. because they wanted to seem like the most energized group there to impress the top leaders of PHP. So that was mandatory. No yawning. You have to be energized at the event and all that. So yeah.
I mean, just like every legit business would teach you how to do, you know? It's like it's such nonsense. It's such a performance. It's such a performance. But yeah, I'm glad you got out of there. And then this brings me to sort of the last thing I wanted to ask you. When you did finally decide to leave, and I'm guessing you had to tell somebody that like I'm actually going. I'm not going to the event. I'm going to this thing. I'm going to college. I'm out. Was there some last ditch attempt to like shame you into staying, or tell you that you're not and you're never going to be anything, or like did they try to grasp at you one last time, or what was the actual process like of you trying to leave?
I don't think it was as hard to leave as you might think. And I think the reason for that is I think they had pretty much milked all the value they could from me. And as a result of that, yeah, I wasn't that valuable to keep to begin with because my warm market was pretty much done. And because I wasn't going to be able to spend that much time to become, I'm going to call it a churner of business on my own. Like being at college, I was going down that path. I wasn't going to be able to spend day and night memorizing the calls and how to recruit people and being able to do that all by myself. And so they weren't really wanting to put in that time anyway. So I was kind of let go in a way, but I think I did have maybe one or two conversations with my mentor at the time, and he was there was a certain level of disagreement for sure about the structure and everything. But yeah,
And what are your thoughts about PHP now?
I think what sums it up perfectly, and you touched on this in a prior stream, is Patrick Bet-David's response to having to take accountability for PHP and him basically renouncing it, I think is the best word to say. And to me, that's just like a huge slap in the face to everybody at PHP and anybody at PHP, if you're watching this, the fact that your CEO is, not taking responsibility for your organization says a lot. And I think that just sums it up.
The narcissist's prayer. I don't know if you heard me say that on the stream,
Yes,
Yeah, a
incredible,
thousand
incredible.
percent.
I do want to like mention though that, and I said this a little bit earlier, but I think there are a lot of people in PHP that don't have like a sinister heart at its core, but it's just the system overall
Yes,
and the business model just poisons everything.
I agree with that. I agree with what you said earlier, which I meant to say earlier, but I'm glad you've brought it up again. I think the people who are at the very top of the company, who are privy to the churn rate, who know the stats, who know that the vast majority of people, virtually all the people, if you actually look at the stats over a multiple year time frame, are going to lose money. You have to at some point recognize that you are lying flat out when you get up there and tell these 18-year-old kids, yeah, and then you can make blah 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 amount of dollars. You're just flat out lying, and you're choosing to lie. For the majority of people though, I do think that they just don't know any better, or they've been successfully manipulated and brainwashed. I do not fault an 18-year-old kid or 20-year-old kid or whatever who's in one of these companies who's been told the same stuff you were told. Oh, well, your teacher, don't you think she cares about you? Oh, think about how your parents are going to cry if you die and you didn't buy this insurance policy. It's like, you know what? When some older, dude who you perceive as an authority because he has a nice car and a nice suit and a nice Rolex, and he's the one at the front of the room with the microphone, and you just believe that he's what he's told you, that he's a rich, successful guy, you're going to just defer to him and assume that he's telling you the truth and that what he's saying is the right thing. So again, it's just like there's a reason that you don't see distinguished people in their 30s and 40s and 50s at these recruitment meetings. You don't see people who are already successful who have jobs. You see people who are like kids, essentially children. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't think everyone is just out here being a scammer. Even there's people who make it to the high levels of the company, and then after years they realize, oh, actually, this is not good. It's powerful when you're constantly inundated, as you explained, with like there's a new goal, the 333. When you're constantly inundated, it's hard to get a moment to just breathe and reflect. Making calls at 9 p.m. and then you're on a Zoom call at 9 a.m. It's like, it's a lot.
I watched a video synopsis of Fahrenheit 451 that I read like in high school or middle school. Have you read that book?
No.
Basically, the concept is they rid the society of all books and have indoctrinated the population through these basically VR rooms that basically project news and propaganda all day and have like basically controlled the population. It's a very popular book. The concept is instead of firefighters, you have fire starters that burn houses that hold books. And that's not the main concept here, but like when you hear that, you're just being constantly blown up with content about, oh, you need to do this, do this, do this, and this is how this is how you should think about recruiting. This is how you should think about this. It like what other choices these people have.
Absolutely. Well, man, I really thank you for sharing your experience with me, and it's such a credit to you that you not only got out when you did, but also that you are willing to share your experience with me, because this is the first one of these multi-level misery calls I've done with someone who was in PHP, and there's a lot of people reaching out to me about it. So I know your story is going to resonate with others and help people. There's going to be some 17-year-old kid who watches this video who's being hit up on LinkedIn to join, who's going to watch this video and go, okay, I identify with Andrew, and I'm not gonna do this. So really appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Marco.